Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. We are especially excited to welcome Jennifer Myers, who will be our presenter today. Before we begin, I would like to point out a few housekeeping tips. If you experience audio difficulties during this broadcast, please write down the phone number listed here or on the link in your email about the webinar. You can then listen on the phone while viewing the broadcast on your computer. If you have any additional technical questions, you may send your inquiries through the question box located on the control panel. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available early next week. Just go to our website and you will find the recording for this webinar and all of our previous webinars. Now, before we turn the time over to Jennifer, I wanted to introduce you to the Dibble Institute. The Dibble Institute is a national independent nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping all young people, regardless of sexual orientation, with the skills and knowledge they need to develop healthy romantic relationships now and for their futures. Charlie Dibble, who is shown here with his wife Helen, founded the Dibble Institute. There's more information on Charlie on our website, as well as information about our core beliefs, one of which is that while we are pro-marriage, we are not anti-divorce for everyone. So, without further ado, I am excited for you to hear from our presenter on teens and technology. So Jennifer Myers holds a master's degree in clinical psychology and is a full-time instructor in the psychology department at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She also has a private clinical psychology practice specializing in adolescents. So Jennifer, thank you for taking time away from your family and busy schedule to share with us your insights.
Thank you, Aaron. So today I'm going to be discussing some research with you regarding the impact of social media use on teen identity formation and their relationships. And this is a topic of great interest and also perhaps great concern for many adults today. Before we begin in earnest, I want to put this current concern into a bit of historical context. We can date back all the way to Socrates to find evidence that when great sociocultural and or technological shifts occurred, these big shifts often elicited concern from the cohorts, the adult cohorts. So we are not the first group to look at a technological advancement with some concern. Case in point, I'd like to read an excerpt from the late 1700s when the readily available novel and fictional novel was beginning to cause concern for the adults in that time frame. So Reverend Enos Hitchcock, 1790. The free access which many young people have to romances, novels, and plays, has poisoned the mind and corrupted the morals of many a promising youth, and prevented others from improving their minds and useful knowledge. Parents take care to feed their children with wholesome diet, and yet how unconcerned about the provision for the mind, whether they are furnished with salutary food, or with trash, chaff, or poison. So it's nice to recognize that we have good company when it comes to our present-day concerns. Kathy, can you turn the slide? So we're going to look at the paradox of social media, and we're going to focus today on Facebook, which currently dominates the teen social networking landscape. Now, the paradox of social media is this. Current technology has given us the greatest access to one another that we have ever had. And it may often appear that we are in almost constant contact with one another. However, a growing concern focuses in on whether the quality of our contact is really intimate and nourishing and supportive enough to replace the face-to-face time that we do seem to be lacking. Now, sites such as Facebook facilitate two very basic human needs, the need for affiliation, or to belong to a group, to belong to one another, and the need to understand the self, the need to have a fully formed identity, and then to control how others see us and how we are presented to one another. So for teens who are actively forming their identity and actively learning how to relate to others and to share themselves with others, this concern about the impact of social media and whether or not that can indeed diminish quantity and quality of quote-unquote real-world friendships bears investigation. Turn the slide, please. Now, I know we said that we were going to focus on teens, but I'm going to turn the tables on us a little bit, and we are instead first going to begin with a few audience questions. Now, these are reflective in nature only, so no responses are needed or actually required at this point. But I want to tell you a quick story about how I approached this project. When I was asked to participate in this webinar, I thought that I'd start with some kitchen table research and go to the small people in my own home, my 8- and 10-year-old daughters, who at this stage are really used to mom's sometimes randomly seeming questions. I thought that we would be discussing their sometime participation in an age-appropriate online game that allows for some limited socialization. What rapidly evolved was a discussion of our family's use of social media, specifically my use of devices. And that was great food for thought. So I'd like to pose these reflective questions to the audience. How much time are you spending engaging in social media? And let's paint that broadly: texting, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. Can you recall an instance where social media has proven beneficial to a relationship? It's helped you keep track of long-lost friends, of your college roommate. Can you recall a time when it was less than beneficial? It was actually detrimental to your relationship. Something got lost in translation, and you actually had to engage in some relational repair. And perhaps more poignantly, more painfully, how often has a family member asked you to unplug from your screen or from your device so that they could have your undivided attention? Now, this is interesting because as we think about teens and we think of what they are trying to accomplish during adolescence as they strive for independence and strive for autonomy, our independent striving teenagers, close to a third of them say that they feel maybe their parents are addicted to devices. Almost 24% of them say that they wish their parents would spend less time on the phone. And our teenagers also recognize that sometimes when they're interacting with friends and peers, that this is a distraction. Half of our teens say that they've been aggravated or hurt by a friend's incessant surfing, texting, etc., while they were together face to face. So just some food for thought. Kathy, can you turn the slide, please? So we're going to turn our laser beam back to teenagers, and we're going to look at some numbers regarding teen involvement with social media. And like I said before, we're going to focus today on Facebook because for this time period, Facebook does dominate the social networking landscape. Now, overall, about 95% of teenagers are online in some shape, form, or another. Approximately 80% of them have a social network site that they use regularly, with somewhere in the order of 3/4 of them using Facebook regularly, as compared to only a quarter of social networking teens who use Twitter. So when we look comparatively, about 1 out of 5 teens don't have a social networking page at all. And there's some interesting research that was conducted in 2010 at the University of Mary Washington. And it's correlational in nature, but it suggested that the more time that students spent on the internet, the less overall well-being they reported. And we've got a chicken and egg problem with this, as we don't know if people are drawn to spending time in Facebook and on the internet because of deficits in their real world, or does the amount of time devoted to being online create deficits in their real world? And we'll talk about that in greater depth in a moment. Can you turn the slide, please? So perhaps before we look at what this heavy diet of social media might be doing to our teenagers, we need to remember and remind ourselves what the tasks of adolescents are. So the two important tasks for our teenagers is to create an identity and to become more sophisticated in our moral reasoning and judgment. The peer environment, the social context is indeed the cauldron in which these two important aspects of development are created and are refined. Now, the evolution of personal identity is a very long and complex integration of the individual's perspective, as well as the perspectives of family and friends, but most importantly, of peers. So research suggests that the more peer support between close friends, the better the impact on the child's self-esteem. Even their GPA improves as a result of peer support. So it's not always a bad thing, the peer influence. Self-esteem and GPA, these important aspects of adolescent life, were improved by peer support and not by parental support to the same degree, which was surprising, I think, to many of us. Now, what social networking also allows for as we strive to create an identity is it allows for the peer environment to have immediate input on the individual. It allows for their impression of the individual to be registered, read repeatedly, and integrated in real time. And most teens historically have not had such great access to such a large peer group that are commenting on their development, on their identity, sometimes on their clothing and hair in real time. Now, morality and moral judgment, moral reasoning is related to our capacity to think interpersonally. And Facebook provides unique opportunities for teens to begin to face some of the interpersonal conflicts that are so present in their real life, in the classroom, in the hallway, on the playground. And Facebook simply reflects those interactions, but in a virtual world. So as teens begin to see conflict online, begin to question behavior and actions of others, this facilitates the development of moral reasoning from a more focused self-interest to a broader, more sophisticated understanding of what's good for the entire whole. And the social environment is what moves both the identity formation and also what moves moral reasoning and judgment. Kathy, can you turn the slide, please? Okay, so as I considered what the primary concerns of the audience seem to be, they seem to refine down to these 5 important concerns. The first one, how are teens presenting themselves online? Are they really aware of potential long-term repercussions of their self-presentation? The second, the bully that can follow your child or the teenager past the doors of the home and into their bedroom. Historically, we've been able to close the home to the playground bully. The internet potentially allows the bully to enter our home in a way that makes many people feel concerned and sometimes even threatened. Friending of strangers. Who are our teens interacting with out in this large world? Online predators. Indeed, the internet has in many ways increased concerns for predation because it allows access to so many unknown individuals. And then finally, the diminished quality of real relationships and possibly long-term repercussions in adolescent diminished capacity for intimacy. In essence, are teens going to come to prefer virtually mediated relationships as opposed to face-to-face interactions? Will they know the difference? So I'd like to start with the first concern, self-presentation. Can you turn the slide, please? Thank you. Now, the research suggests something very relieving for individuals who are concerned that teens are not aware of the long-term repercussions of their online identities. Most socially networked teens are working very hard to maintain control of their image. So the research that I looked at suggested that almost 2/3 acknowledged that they had chosen to not post something online because they were concerned about how it might reflect upon them in the future. So they're thinking, how might this impact my future life? Close to 60% have actively deleted and edited things they've posted in the past as they've taken a moment to reconsider. More than 50% have deleted comments from others on their profile or account. So not only are they monitoring themselves, but within reason, they are attempting to monitor others. Almost half have actually removed their names from photos in which they've been tagged to identify them. Roughly a third have deleted or deactivated entire profiles or accounts. So what this all suggests is that teens are actively working to create an appropriate long-term impression of themselves. Now, that being said, we're all, but teens in particular, are vulnerable to certain characteristics that the internet holds that, for example, the wall of a bathroom at the school does not have the same, did not create the same concern. So Dana Boyd in 2014 published a great book on this topic. Her book is called It's Complicated, and it addresses teens and social networking. And Dr. Boyd suggests that the internet facilitates 4 important aspects that may defy even the most capable teen in their attempts to manage their image: persistence, visibility, searchability, and spreadability. Persistence, and we all have this sense that what is loaded up in the internet has the potential for living forever. This is not something that's easily expunged or painted over. Visibility, the potential audience who can witness a teen's social misstep, misdeed, misbehavior. Spreadability, the ease with which content can be shared. We've even created new verbal lexicon to understand the rapidity with which information and events can be shared and spread. We talk about something going viral, spreading from one person, a handful to hundreds, to thousands, to maybe even a million within a very short period of time. And that is unique to the challenges that teens have today with respect to self-presentation. And finally, searchability, the ease with which a curious searcher can find content on the teen. So all of these are very real concerns, but somewhat reassuring is the message that teens have received, which is how you present yourself online reflects upon you and can have long-term impact on your future. You're not the only one who's on Facebook. When we look at Facebook use, we recognize that approximately 80% of teens are on Facebook as compared to approximately 80% of adults. So teens have gotten the message that the Facebook world that they inhabit is not a private space. It is a public space. It is the new playground. Kathy, can you please turn the slide? Now, of significant concern is the possibility that the internet, through a couple mechanisms that are unique to the internet, might be facilitating interpersonal aggression and or bullying. And so we're looking at a picture of Rebecca Sedgwick. She was 12 when she committed suicide. She had been the recipient of frequent social, verbal, relational attacks that had been posted via social media, where questions could be posted to the recipient anonymously. Rebecca typifies the great terror that most adults feel when we consider not being able to adequately protect our children, our teenagers, or sometimes even ourselves from the bully that can follow you into your home. So let's look at the numbers. Almost 90% of teens have witnessed online interpersonal attacks. And this is important to compare to adult witnesses of interpersonal attacks because 2/3, 66% of adults have witnessed online interpersonal attacks between other adults. So while it's important to remember that social networking sites like Facebook, it didn't create bullying, these sites do reflect the greater volatility of adolescent relationships. Now, with respect to online aggression, close to 70% teens say that by and large their online peers are mostly kind. And we're going to compare this again to adult statistics on this. 85% of adults say online interactions are mostly kind. So we see the difference in maturation, and we see the difference in relational skills and conflict resolution when we look from teenagers to adult interactions in this space. Now, there are perhaps 5 principal reasons why the internet may allow for attacks in a way that face-to-face interactions typically prohibit or curtail. Internets allow for ease of access to the victim and potentially an unlimited audience, and we recognize that public humiliation is a critical point with respect to aggression and bullying. They do perpetuate some decrease in inhibition. Excuse me, it's hard to say that. In inhibition. 25% of teens admit that they've actually said something online that was unkind that they would not have said in person, where 2 things function. 1 is a fear of immediate retaliation in a physical way, and 2, perhaps more humanely, when we have access to the face and the experience, the emotional experience of someone we are with in real time in the real world, we often inhibit aggression as we can read how our behavior is causing them to feel. Now, anonymity is also an important feature for online aggression. The anonymous nature of social media can give rise to feelings of de-individuation, meaning that you're part of the mob and you will not be identified or publicly held responsible for your actions. And we recognize mob behavior as being a key component to acts of historically great violence. Finally, the environment provides for a decreased lack of social control. The internet is not quite as closely monitored by other adult monitors as would the classroom, the hallway, the playground be. So the perception that no authority figure is watching may also cause for decreased inhibition with respect to aggression. And finally, 2 interesting distortions in perception that also may lead to disinhibition is when the individual that we're interacting with through the internet begins to feel like a character in your head. They're not real, they've been dehumanized. And when the experience of going online begins to feel separate from the real world, where it's just another game with a different set of rules. So the internet can give rise to some aspects of dehumanization. Despite all of this, the majority of teens report that when it comes to being picked on, they actually tend to feel more afraid and more threatened when they're bullied in person, and they are often more easily likely to dismiss online bullying as less impactful to them and/or drama. They call it drama because it allows for 2 individuals to go back and forth in a reciprocal form of social aggression and relational aggression, which is concerning, but the teens are reporting that for the most part, it's less impactful than the aggression that they experience when they're face-to-face. Kathy, could you please turn the slide? So, who are teens sharing their virtual lives with? Okay, well, the median number of Facebook friends for a teenager is 300. I find that amazing. In fact, there's a small minority who will reach into the 600 or more friends. Now, the majority of individuals, Facebook friends, are real people that the students, the teens have met in real life. They're school friends. They are friends at a different school. They're family members, parents, siblings, they're extended family members. The group that's most likely to have relationships, online relationships with other individuals whom they have never met tend to be older teens, and about 1/3 of older teens say that they're friends with someone they've never met before, and shared interest is most often the cited reason for these new unmet friends. They've found themselves into collaborative shared interest sites where they learn about new people. Now, of great concern is the impact on family members and on family relationships, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when we think about the teens' need for affiliation and their need for peer support and peer connection. It's important to remember that the teen life is highly structured and scheduled, by and large, in a way that we haven't seen quite before. They've lost approximately 20% of their individual free time, downtime, over the last few decades. And so many teens report that they lack access to friends in real life, and they lack the flexibility in order to make and interact with friends in the real world. And so seeking companionship, seeking friendship, seeking connection, they are reaching out to friends in this virtual playground via social networking sites. Okay, Kathy, can you turn the slide, please? So what purpose is all of this serving? And I alluded to it briefly. We have a deep need for connection in any accessible form. And as adults, and this may resonate with adults in the audience, anyone who spent days and or weeks trying to meet up with a friend recognizes how tightly scheduled many of us are. And as adults become more scheduled, so do our teens. And so cell phones and social networking sites begin to fill in the gap that is left by our daily lives. Now, the purpose that Facebook and social networking serves differs across individual and interpersonal factors. What's been most interesting for me in this research was the effect that it has on teens who are shy, maybe socially anxious or inhibited, or maybe teens who are facing a period of peer rejection in their daily life, peer rejection from classmates, etc. The research suggests that these teens may engage in more social media use, and as they engage in more social media use, they report that they're sharing more personally and more intimately online than teens who are not endorsing the same rates of loneliness, shyness, or social rejection. For our loneliest teens, as they interact online, feelings of connection go up and feelings of isolation go down, and those are two very good things for teenagers who may be socially inhibited, shy, and or rejected. And what's really interesting about this is that neurological research suggests that when we are looking at the pictures of a friend and we're represented there and we see ourselves online having a good time, we have an oxytocin released by the brain, and we recognize that oxytocin seems to be the hormone associated with attachment and bonding. Oxytocin is released during labor, and it's released during breastfeeding. Oxytocin is released when we look at the picture of a long-term, deeply loved partner. Oxytocin is calming to us. It helps us feel bonded, and it calms us. What's interesting is that the brain perceives these virtual relationships as real in some important way, real enough to trigger a release of this critical hormone. And this hormone is critical to our survival because we are so interpersonally connected to one another and need to be. So it's important to qualify this, though, to suggest that for teens who have chronic loneliness, mere interaction through the internet, although it can be soothing and help with feelings of isolation and help with feelings of connectedness, interaction through the internet does not seem to appreciatively change or diminish chronic loneliness. And perhaps chronic loneliness is the domain of face-to-face and real-time, real interactions. And so that is different across virtual and real in-person relationships. Kathy, can you please turn the slide? So of great concern is online solicitation by predators, the possibility that children and teens could be approached and lured away from the safety of their home by a sexual predator. In 2006, 85% believed that parents perceived the internet as the most dangerous environment that their teen experienced. Now, the backdrop to this is that the Department of Justice keeps track of crime statistics and crime rates say that over the last 10 years, violent non-fatal crimes against our teenagers have been steadily declining. Indeed, they went down by half from 1993 to 2003. So comparatively speaking, our teens are safer than they've ever been. That being said, 1 out of every 7 children has experienced sexual solicitation online, and that cannot be ignored. 1 out of 7 is significant. This is according to a 2006 Crimes Against Children Research Center survey. It's important to unpack this data a little bit and look more carefully at it. The way that the CACRC defines sexual solicitation was, it was painted very broadly, from flirtation, online flirtation, all the way to aggressive sexual harassment. So that they cast a very wide net and captured a wide range of behaviors. Now, what's important as we look through this data is to note that only 4% of all of these solicitations were from adults over the age of 25. In fact, more than 3/4 of them were coming from minors towards other minors. And the context of that is, of the minors who acknowledged that they had had some type of solicitation, more than 3/4 reported they hadn't been frightened or threatened by the experience at all. Important to note is that 1/4 of them had experienced some alarm about this. 17% of online teenagers say that they were approached in a way that made them feel uncomfortable, and girls are twice as likely than boys to report that they felt scared or threatened by the experience, and that simply mirrors the real-world experiences of girls versus boys, where real-world sexual harassment and predation is more prevalent for girls across their age than for boys. Ironically enough, when we ask individuals how safe they feel on the internet, 90% of teens and 90% of their parents say that overall they feel very safe on the internet. All right, Kathy, can you please turn? So, how do teens feel about all of this? It's important to get their perspective. And interestingly enough, they report significantly more positive than negative interpersonal and intrapersonal consequences. Teens say that using social networking media tends to make them feel less shy, more outgoing. 20% say that it helps with their confidence. They feel better liked. And interestingly, 20% said that, almost 20% said that they felt more sympathetic towards others. So the use of social media was somehow engendering greater sympathy, which we recognize sympathy can lead to empathy and can also lead to compassionate action, so the best of human emotion. Half say that overall it's helped their friendships. Social media is remarkably good with respect to helping people initiate new friendships and helping people to stay in touch with individuals that they don't see regularly, and that's very important for teenagers. When we look at family relationships, and I had alluded to that earlier, 3/4 say that social media has mainly been helpful with their family members. They feel more connected, more in touch, are able to share more of their busy day. Important to Americans who, by and large, able-bodied working Americans, spend most of their day with their colleagues and not with their family. Only 2% of teens say that social networking has hurt their relationships with their family, and only 5% of social networking teens say that they felt intrapersonally less comfortable with themselves, less confident, less well-liked, more shy after their experience. By and large, teens are saying this tends to be overall a positive experience, both with their peers and with their families. Now, when we look at our most vulnerable teenagers, the teenagers who are endorsing clinical levels of depression, it's important to look at the impact of social media on them. And of the 10% of teens who endorsed depression, 13% said it helped lessen their depression. So That's an interesting to note. Kathy, can you turn the page, please? So let's look at impact on life satisfaction, and this is across the lifespan. This does not just hold true for teens. This certainly holds true for adults. Social comparison is a very powerful influence on our personal feelings of contentment. Downward social comparison, in a nutshell, when we compare ourselves to others who seem to be less fortunate in the moment or across life, and we come away with the thought of, well, it could be worse for us. It could always be worse. Downward social comparison allows us a moment of perspective taking, and frequently we come away feeling a bit more at peace, a bit more contented with our own lives, and this is a healthy thing. Now, upward social comparison, on the other hand, essentially keeping up with the Joneses and feeling that you failed terribly at that task, this tends to foster discontent or less satisfaction with our personal lives. So, interesting research. When people view their own Facebook pages, which represents a highly sanitized version of our lives, our best pictures, our happiest memories, our greatest moments, everybody on Facebook is having a great time. When people view their own Facebook pages for a mere 3 minutes, they feel better because we're looking at the very best of our lives, which indeed are present. But here we've put them all in one place where we can look at them. Now, when people view the Facebook pages of others, particularly those Facebook pages where we are not related and we're not present, we feel more deflated. Case in point, we tend to underestimate our peers' negative experiences by easily 17% and overestimate their positive experiences by 6% when we're looking at Facebook. Recently, I was looking at a friend's Facebook page, the posting she had put on for the week, and her beautiful family and their great trip to the beach, they looked like they were having a blast, and indeed, I'm sure they were. What Facebook viewers could not have perceived, and what I knew as a close friend, was that the family was dealing with a raging case of head lice that had infested them and they couldn't get rid of. That wasn't visible on their Facebook page. And so Facebook and social networking, they're great examples of public venues where people play up the positive and can hide the negative, which can lead to a sense that we're the only ones not having a party. All right, Kathy, can you turn the page, please? So teen concerns about social media, they largely dovetail with adult concerns, and I find that tremendously reassuring. A third of teens agree that using social media diminishes face-to-face interactions. Teens, by and large, prefer face-to-face interactions. That's what they would choose if they had the capacity to access their friends face-to-face. A distant second is texting. If they can't see face-to-face, then they'll text. Beyond that, our teens at 7% are willing to use a social network to engage with our friends. The phone is a very distant 4% of teens prefer that as their favorite way to interact. And Twitter is 1% of teens. So teens do not devalue the impact of in-person communication. That's their preference. It's more fun, it's more immediate, it's more comfortable. 44% agree that using social media can distract from people in real life. And like I said earlier, about half of them got aggravated with friends that couldn't put the phones down. And about 30% of them get aggravated with their parents who can't disconnect. And nearly 3/4 wish that sometimes they could unplug. Just because we're always accessible, does that mean we must always respond? And some teens feel very overwhelmed by the sheer number of social responses that they are expected to give. Teens who are most likely to wish that they could unplug are the teens who do not have a social networking page or teens who have experienced online cruelty. Kathy, could you turn the page, please? All right, so when all else fails, a little levity is useful. It's helpful for me to remember all the other examples of sociocultural and technological shifts that have really shaken individuals in the moment, and yet somehow we survive them. In fact, it often becomes kind of amusing. Chess, chess, chess. People were concerned about chess. The waltz, the telegraph, the telephone, jazz, rock, reading of novels, cars, bicycles, haircuts, short skirts, comic books, rock, Madonna, bikinis, and video games have all caused significant concern in the past. Kathy, can you turn the slide, please? So what can adults do? I really do believe that we lead by example. Monitor your own use of social media. And if I can share a quick story with you, as a clinician, the time that I spend with my clients is, well, it's sacred. And we strive to eliminate all potential distractions from this one-on-one interaction. I remember years ago, unfortunately, a phone call snuck through, and it startled both of us when it rang loudly. That didn't typically happen. And I remember the child looking at me and saying, "Mrs. Myers, you can answer that." And it was such a moment for me. This child was so used to being placed second to adults that even in something like her therapy session, she was willing to stand aside and let the adult get on with work. And it took a moment for me to respond to her. And when I did, I made it very clear that she was my priority, that the human in front of me was my priority, and that the phone call could wait. So monitor your own use of social media, and given how plugged in we all are, you will have ample opportunity to make this very clear to the students that you're teaching, the kids that you're coaching, the children that you're parenting, that they come first. And when they can't, there is a clear and explicit reason for this, why the phone must be answered, the laptop must be attended to. Become more educated about a teen's primary social media networking sites. I found this piece of research very funny. The majority of teenagers, particularly older teenagers, feel quite competent in managing their privacy settings on Facebook, as compared to many adults who find it bewildering. So to the extent possible, become more educated about your primary social media networking sites, and begin to open a dialogue about safe and appropriate use of the internet. Everything that I read with respect to research suggested the majority of teens are listening. 95% of teens say that their parents have access to everything about them online. 5% or fewer are actively concealing things. That's significant. So I hope we can all take some comfort with that. And then finally, set limits about where and when and how media can be used. Create sanctified time that excludes social media. This is time for real people together, eyes on, ears attending. Class time, practice, family meals are all prime times for this. Treat the internet like a guest. Sooner or later, guests go home. Sooner or later, the phone puts down. And then finally, listen more than you talk. Teens are particularly vulnerable to perceiving judgment and anger on the face of an adult who is demonstrating the emotional display of concern. They're going to do this until their early 20s. Be aware that when you create opportunities for dialogue, listen. Listen 5 times more than you talk, and you might be surprised at how much you begin to hear from your teenagers. And I think we are close to running out of time, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you inviting me here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jennifer. I mean, the information that you've shared is just absolutely very appropriate, and gives us a lot of food for thought. And actually, here at the Dibble Institute, so next slide, Kathy. Here at the Dibble Institute, we've also heard from a lot of the teachers and instructors that we work with about how important it is to teach teens about social media, and very much it's like a tool. As with any tool, you can either use it in a way that's going to hurt, or you can use it in a way that's going to help. And so what we did was we actually ended up partnering with one of our authors who has written a number of award-winning programs, Marlene Pearson, and she actually has developed a 1-hour-long lesson that helps teachers and instructors to teach teenagers how to use this tool of social media in a way that is helpful for their romantic relationships, their family relationships, their friend relationships, and we packaged it all together in this 1 hour long lesson. And in the lesson, we also have embedded a number of amazing videos that were actually created by teens for teens that reinforce a lot of the concepts that Jennifer was talking about. Everything from the dangers of sexting to the communication, as far as, especially with communication, because obviously texting, there are no visual cues, and they have this one great video where they show these this couple who have a conversation in person, and then the screenshot next to it is the same couple having a similar conversation through texting, and the outcome is totally completely different. So it really helps to reinforce that. And actually what you're looking at right now is a screenshot of the digital program that we've put together. And what we've also tried to do is make it very cost-effective and inexpensive. And so it's actually available for $20. That gets you 1 year access. And I'm actually in the chat box, I'm going to send out the URL where you're able to go and look at it and then also purchase it for the $20. But also, next slide, it also comes with the PowerPoint presentation, and a few of these next slides are actually from the PowerPoint presentation to give you kind of a flavor of what Marlene has put together. And so that first slide is an activity that she has you start off with the teens to help them to learn exactly what Jennifer was talking about, that whole concept that the persona that we put on with our Facebook pages doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And I absolutely love Jennifer's example of that friend of hers who was whose family was dealing with that raging case of head lice, because it really does show how sometimes if we are comparing ourselves at our worst to other people at what we think is their best, so this family at the beach, then we often feel lacking. And so this activity really helps to reinforce and helps the teens to understand that they're not the only ones who are putting their best foot forward on Facebook, and that they really need to understand that concept that you really should not be comparing yourself at your worst to other people at their best, that lifestyle that other people are portraying on their Facebook pages. So that's the first activity, kind of a warm-up activity. And then Kathy, next slide. The next thing that Marlene covers is very much how in today's day and age we literally are constantly connected. In fact, I think the only time that most teens are not connected is when their battery dies. And so at that point, they disconnect involuntarily. But what Marlene also helps the teens to understand is how can that impact their romantic relationships, their friendship relationships, their family relationships. And next slide, Kathy. So, and then the next section in this lesson is about how intimacy, it literally is, it's more than a physical thing, and how you can use the social media tools, texting, the Facebook, the Twitter, etc. All of those are tools that can enhance intimacy if they are used in a healthful way, but at the same time too, it can actually end up destroying intimacy through breaches of trust, etc. And in essence, what this whole lesson is about, it's about education. Because at the Dibble Institute, we really honestly believe that by empowering teens with education about social media tools, that they'll be able to lead that better life. And so, Kathy, next slide. And then the other thing that Marlene also covers is very much some of the emotional, social, and legal issues that can come up with social media, especially when it comes to sexting. And once again, there's a great video that really reinforces that concept in terms of how some of this stuff, it doesn't necessarily go away. Snapchat, yeah, it says it goes away in 10 seconds, but if somebody does a screenshot save, then and then posts it to another thing, and it doesn't necessarily go away. And so she covers that as well. And then next slide, Kathy. And then the last area that Marlene talks about in this lesson is the whole concept of addiction. And that very much because of the way that our brains are set up and the brain neurochemicals, hormones that are released as we interact with social media, it actually literally can become a physical addiction. Some of the research that they found is that the withdrawals from unplugging from social media, from the text, has actually ended up being very similar to the withdrawals that people go through when they're withdrawing from heroin. Now, obviously, it's not to the same degree, but a lot of the chemicals are very similar, and so there's the irritability, there's the shakiness, etc. And so it actually can become an addiction, but if used within proper boundaries and proper limits are set, then obviously it can be a great thing. And so Marlene gives some suggestions that you can give to the teens on how to deal with that. And the next slide, Kathy.
Okay, Aaron, we've got a couple.
Actually, at this point,
we've got a couple. We've got a couple of questions. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we've got a few minutes for questions, and so if you have questions for Jennifer or I, in the right-hand side in that question box, go ahead and type that in.
Okay, and I'm Kathy.
So go ahead, Kathy.
Yes, and I'm Kathy. I've been the person behind the screen, so I appreciate being here. And Jennifer, we have a question for you from Ken. You mentioned about teens wanting more FaceTime with their parents. He wants to know what ideas that you might have for how teens could influence their parents to reduce their use of social media and give them more FaceTime.
That's such a good question. So, well, let's take a page out of behaviorism. So I'm a psychologist. Let's take a page out of behaviorism. We tend to respond best to positive reinforcement when our behavior is reinforced. It increases in a way that we like. It increases the likelihood that we're going to engage in whatever behavior we've associated with the reinforcement again in the future. So the teen that is able to ask for attention, great. If they're able to, great. But for some teens, what they're going to have to do is when their parents are talking to them with a screen down, to listen, to engage with the parent, to respond to the parent in a way that is reinforcing for us. I think that as a population, we really expect our teens to vanish emotionally from us as they're moving towards adulthood. And the teen that connects their eyes to their parents, listens, talks, responds, just may be enormously reinforcing to the adult who has expected to lose their child during this time. So by responding wholeheartedly to the adult, if asking directly is not possible, those are my thoughts. That's my 2 cents on that.
That is great. I just do want to let people know there have been a couple questions about a PDF of the PowerPoint that will be put on our website by the recording, as well as Jennifer has made up a Word document that we'll post by the recording as well that has some of her resources that you may want to go back to and title of books and whatnot. Someone also asked the question, if they have the 3.0 edition of Relationship Smarts Plus curriculum, is this lesson in it? Yes, this is lesson 12 of the updated, brand new Relationship Smarts Plus curriculum. So if you do teach relationship skills or relationship class, you might want to go online and look at the entire curriculum. If you just teach or want a little chapter of social media and teens, then you might want to purchase this online for just the chapter. So let's see if there are any other questions here. Is there anything else anyone would like to ask? I think we can move on then, Aaron. And let me just let you know, if you have questions and we did not get to them, then we will be sure to get to them by email. personally to you. Okay?
Yep, perfect. And so just want to thank everyone, especially want to thank Jennifer again, and want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Just like it says on the screen, that if you do wish to order Dibble materials following this broadcast, you can do so online at our website. And all the orders following the live presentation of the broadcast are eligible for free shipping. Just be sure to note webinar on the order form. We also do have a brief survey we would love for you to fill out as you exit the webinar. And we do read every single comment, and it helps us to create better webinars. If you do have any other questions, feel free to contact Kathy or I by email. And we also look forward to keeping in touch with you through the Dibble e-newsletter, where you can remain current on issues relating to teen/young adults, programs, funding, and research. So if you haven't already signed up, you can do so by going to our website. So Kathy, what's the upcoming October webinar going to be about?
Well, I'm very excited about the October webinar. We are going to be focusing on it's called What's in a Name? Defining Dating Violence for Teens Through Healthy Relationship Education. And I'm really excited to have our presenter, Catherine Hilgren, who is out of Springfield, Missouri, share that. It is Domestic and Dating Violence Month in October, so we will be talking quite a bit about that, which is quite a big issue with teens and young adults. So thank you so much, and I will have that registration up probably by Monday as well. So thank you so much. You all have a good afternoon. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, actually, hey, Kathy, real quick, it looks like another question, since we do have about 3 minutes, another question came in from Margaret, and so this is for Jennifer. So Jennifer, she said, how would you address the self-image aspect of how many followers a young person has? I've heard that a lot from my students.
So I think that that's a fairly complicated question, and some research suggests that the sheer number, the sheer volume of individuals that maybe, a teen may be friends with, at some point the number simply becomes overwhelming, and this becomes in some degree about status. And so it might not be that the individual teen with 600 Facebook friends is interacting or impacted largely by these 600, but that it serves a status. It serves status for them in their social environments. So I think that this is hard to address broadly. Individuals will have a better sense of what is going on with the teen who is seeking 600 or more friends. I think beginning to talk to the teen about who do you talk to most often on Facebook? Who do you hear from most often? If there is a way to have this dialogue and this discussion in a manner that doesn't sound like an interrogation, that is the direction to shoot for. But to begin to understand, how is this adolescent using this tool, and is there a need that isn't being met in the real world? So you might take a look at, how is this teen doing in her real life? Does she have close friends that she spends time with? How is she doing academically? How is she doing with respect to resolving image? And we understand that there's a lot of fluctuation that happens as they form their identities, but what are her core values? How is she treating others around her? And so when you begin to look at the overall health of how she's interacting both with others and with herself in the real world, that may either relieve concerns for the teen who has inadvertently become Facebook friends with 600 people, or it may give rise to the need for deeper communication on this issue. It may suggest that this teen is missing something of greater depth in her real life. And there's nothing more intimate than beginning to talk to another person about how they feel about themselves. And that dialogue in and of itself can begin to engender greater intimacy and greater relief for the concerned parent as they understand, what does this mean? So there's no hard and fast rule. Limit your child to 100 Facebook friends. There's actually no good rule for this. I think beginning to talk to the child about what this means to her and what purpose is it serving, as well as looking at her real life, might begin to point you in the right direction as far as, is this something to investigate further or not?
Excellent. So once again, just wanted to thank Jennifer, and that looks like it's a perfect ending point. And so we'd once again like to thank everyone for joining our webinar today, and goodbye, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.